in Chapter 14, we were into the brain and the cranial nerves. We left off, we had gotten to the point of the brain stem, and of course, one of the things I want to try to get you guys to remember about the brain stem, the brain stem is going to be that primitive region of the brain because of the way that it's going to contribute so heavily to our homeostasis, breathing rate, heart rate, chemicals and chemical levels in the body like the pH, O2, CO2. It's going to be regulating. Well, that's going to actually come into parts of the hypothalamus. So we're going to find all these different areas contributing to homeostasis. So we left off at the medulla oblongata, and the next part that we're going to talk about, of course, is the pons. And since we're working our way up the brain stem, if you guys remember, we had the brain out. That sounds so crazy. We had the brain out, looking at them, and if we're starting with the brain stem, this, of course, medulla oblongata, okay? Now we're going to be moving to the pons. Just superior to the medulla, has both ascending and descending tracts. Do you guys remember me mentioning nuclei? Okay, the nuclei are going to be these regions of very dense nerve cell bodies. Now let's think about that again, because if we're saying the nerve cell body, once again, let's go back to what we think of as a neuron: body, dendrite, axon, terminal end. Okay, so the nuclei are going to be areas where there are millions of the nerve cell body. Hundreds of thousands. Okay, lots. All right. Now, one of the areas in the pons is termed the pontine area. The reason that this one kind of gets a little bit of attention because it's associated with our sleep center. So that is one of the things that really gets associated. And we're going to find it's associated with the respiratory center. Two very important parts of homeostasis. The midbrain. This one, when you're looking at the embryonic development of the brain, you'll see the stuff like the mesencephalon, diencephalon, telencephalon, that sort of thing. Well, this was part of the med, and this one, superior to the pons, the medulla pons, midbrain, nuclei. In this one, a couple of, now once again, I'm not going to ask you guys to be specific, okay? Because I want you to understand, ascending, descending. In this area, for those nuclei, well, look at our term here. Corpora quadrigemina. What does quad mean? Four. Okay? So, it's telling us that we're going to have 4 of these nuclei. Okay? The cool thing about them, we've got 2 that are superior, 2 that are inferior. Look at what they're involved with. Now, we have gone from medulla to the pons to the midbrain. Think about your anatomy, all right? Getting closer to the base of the brain, to other areas. We've got involvement of vision, which is kind of cool, the skin, and we're making a connection to the cerebrum. So at this point, we're going to have a connection with the part of the brain that we associate with being higher order thinking. It's kind of the connection that the brain, the higher order thinking part of the brain has with the brain stem is really interesting, because if you think about how many of you have really good memory? Like can remember stuff from being like 5 years old or 6 years old.
What did I have for breakfast this morning?
Right. That's me. What did I have for breakfast this morning? I actually have to stop and think about it. It's like, okay, I can tell you all of these steps in the DNA making a protein, and I can, like, you know, talk about the last operon and all this sort of type of stuff, but I can't remember what I had for breakfast. All right? But when certain things happen, it'll trigger a memory. Maybe I see something, or do something, smell something, hear something, okay? Because we're going to have this really cool connection with things that monitor homeostasis to higher order thinking, which gets really interesting. Now, in this area of the midbrain, we have what's called red nuclei and then substantia nigra. What this is basically saying is the red nuclei unconscious. In other words, it's helping in an unconscious way to regulate and coordinate motor activity. What would be a motor activity?
Is this like physical coordination? Like not so much the moving of the hand, but like moving it in space?
No, actually it's going to be helping with this coordination. So it's very interesting. Then we're going to find another area connected. Now look at what it's connected to. Basal nuclei. What does that mean? What would basal nuclei mean? What does the term basal mean? Not like the little green stuff that goes over food. The base. So, basal nuclei of my cerebrum. So this area that's up here, this midbrain, once again another connection to my cerebrum. It has ascending and descending tracts. That probably didn't help. In this area, we begin to see a little bit of division. In the other two areas, medulla oblongata, the pons, we simply said ascending, descending. All right? Now, look at what we're seeing. For my ascending tracts, I'm getting a route to the brain. Why? Why would I have a route from the midbrain to an area of the brain now?
Insert information.
But why? Maybe I should say how. How am I getting a connection now from the midbrain to my cerebrum? Marlisha?
Isn't that like that word thing, that first second?
Go. Sort of. But what did I point out? We now have a connection between. Anthony? And my midbrain. In what way? Now this is how I want to get y'all to thinking. Okay? If I have those nuclei, what did we say nuclei were? The nuclei that I mentioned. What is it? What was it? My nerve cell body. What part is not being my axon? So, if I have these nerve cell bodies in the midbrain, and now just said this basal nuclei of the cerebrum, nerve cell bodies, what can be between? Axons. So, I now have, now look what it tells me. It now says that in this area called the tegmentum, I now have my ascending tracts go to the brain. My descending tracts go from the brainstem to the spinal cord. Kind of got a little bit of division now. And it's because, Marlisha, we're going to find that first, second, third, and a fourth order. Okay? Because if I'm at my midbrain, I'm very close to hypothalamus and thalamus. Which one of those was my relay center? The thalamus was my relay center. That is like, okay, so all those terms that we just mentioned, where we have our red nucleus, we've got the substantia nigra, we had the little peduncles, okay? Those are the little points that are going to point off where we're going to find ascending and descending tracts, okay? This would be a cross section through that midbrain, which is really kind of cool. Getting to a connection in some way between that very primitive area of the brain and the part of the brain for the higher order skills. One of the other parts that you're going to find, once again, nuclei. What is it? Dense, an area of dense nerve cell bodies. So as they're located throughout the brainstem, we have this formation called the reticular formation. Ever heard of it? It's kind of weird, all right? We don't understand a lot of it, but what we know is it kind of looks like the rays of the sun going out through into other areas of the brain. They have associated with the reticular formation activities like our